You spend enough time on the road, you learn to appreciate the quiet. Not silence, mind you. A big rig is never silent. There's always the deep, gut-rumbling thrum of the diesel engine, the whine of the turbo, the constant hiss of air in the lines, the tires singing their own song on the asphalt. That's not silence. That's the sound of my life. The quiet I'm talking about is the one that settles in your mind when you're 300 miles from the nearest city, with nothing but the twin beams of your headlights cutting a path through the dark. It's a loneliness so profound it becomes a kind of company. I've been driving for over 20 years. I've hauled everything from fresh produce to heavy machinery across every state in the lower 48. I've seen sunrises over the Utah salt flats that would make a painter weep, and I've fought blizzards in Wyoming that made me question every choice I'd ever made. I've seen things, but most of what you hear out here, the stories swapped over burnt coffee at 3 a.m. in a dusty truck stop, are just that, stories. Tales of phantom hitchhikers, of ghost lights on the desert horizon. Bull. The road is hard enough without adding things that go bump in the night. I'm a practical man. I believe in what I can see, what I can touch, and what shows up on my fuel gauge. But there was always one story that stuck with me. A story about a stretch of road in Oregon. I was hauling a load of lumber from Medford up to Portland, a route I didn't take often. It snakes you up through the Umpqua National Forest, through mountains that feel ancient and wild. It's beautiful country, the kind of green that hurts your eyes, with trees so tall you have to crane your neck out the window to see the tops. But it's also empty. You can go an hour without seeing another soul, just the endless whispering pines. I'd pulled into a rest stop just south of the pass to check my tires and grab a thermos of coffee. An old-timer, a guy with a face like a worn-out road map, was there doing the same. We got to talking, the way you do. I mentioned my route, and his eyes got a little distant. "You'll be going through the Singing Pines, then," he said, his voice a low gravel. "The what?" "The Singing Pines," he repeated, taking a slow sip from his own cup. "That's what we call a particular stretch up on the pass. About 5 miles of it. The trees there, they're old, real old, and they grow so close and tall they block out the sky. When the wind comes down off the mountain, it gets trapped in there, makes a sound." I grunted. "Wind through the pines, heard that 1,000 times. He shook his head slowly. "No, not like this. This ain't just the wind. It's a tune, a real melody, like a woman humming a lullaby." He stared into the dark woods bordering the rest stop. "The legend says it's a spirit, a pioneer woman from back in the 1800s. Her wagon broke an axle trying to get over the mountains before the first snow. Her husband went for help and never came back, so she was left, alone with her newborn baby." He paused, and the night suddenly felt colder. "Now," the old-timer finished, "they say she's still there, still in those woods, and every time the wind blows through that pass, she hums that same lullaby for her baby, still trying to keep it calm in the cold." I forced a chuckle. "That's a hell of a story, old man." He just looked at me, his eyes dead serious. "It's no story. You listen when you get up there. You'll hear her. They all do." He finished his coffee, gave me a solemn nod, and climbed back into his rig, leaving me alone with the humming of my own engine and the sudden, unwelcome image of a mother and her child freezing in an endless forest. I shook my head, dismissing it. A campfire story, that's all. But as I pulled back onto the highway and saw the sign for the mountain pass looming ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet I usually craved was the last thing I wanted right now. The pines were waiting. The climb began gradually. The road narrowed, hugging the side of the mountain like it was afraid of falling. On my right, a sheer drop into a black, invisible valley. On my left, a solid wall of rock and dirt with the feet of colossal pine trees rising up into the night. My headlights were the only things alive in the world, sweeping across the reflective eyes of some small creature and the ghostly white bark of an occasional birch tree mixed in with the pines. I had the radio on, some late-night talk show. The host was laughing about something, but the sound felt thin and hollow out here. The further I drove, the denser the forest became. The trees weren't just beside the road anymore. They were a canopy, their high branches interlocking over me, creating a tunnel of absolute blackness. It felt like I was driving through a forgotten cathedral built by giants. The air coming through my vent, which had smelled of dust and diesel, now carried the sharp, clean, heavy scent of pine and damp earth. That's when I first heard it. It was subtle, a faint, high-pitched note weaving in and out of the engine's rumble. At first, I thought it was a problem with the turbo. You get paranoid about sounds in a rig. A new squeal or a different kind of vibration can be the first sign of a $5,000 repair bill. I listened closer, my hand hovering over the radio dial. It wasn't mechanical. It was too musical, too fluid. It must be the wind, I told myself. Just like the old-timer said, the wind getting trapped in these ancient trees, that's all. But the sound grew. It wasn't just a single note anymore. It was a sequence, a slow, mournful rising and falling melody. It was simple, the way a lullaby is, unmistakable. My blood ran cold. My hand, which had been hovering, now decisively snapped the radio off. The talk show host was silenced mid-sentence. The cab was plunged into a world of just three sounds: my engine, my tires, and the humming. Without the radio to compete with, the humming was terrifyingly clear. It wasn't the wind. The wind is a mindless force. It shrieks and moans and sighs. This was different. This had intent. It was a tune, deliberate and paced. It was the sound of a voice, a woman's voice, humming with a sorrow so deep it felt like a physical weight. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, from the trees outside, from the air itself. At times, it was so clear, so close, it felt like it was coming from the passenger seat right next to me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitened. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I'm a grown man. I faced down road rage drivers and stared into the eyes of a jackknife trailer sliding towards me on black ice. But this was a different kind of fear. This was a primal fear, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up and whispers that the world is much older and stranger than you think. The 5 miles the old-timer mentioned felt like 50. The melody swelled, getting louder and louder until it was a living presence in the cab. It was beautiful in a way, hauntingly, achingly beautiful. But it was the beauty of a fresh grave, of a final heartbreaking goodbye. It was the sound of utter despair and infinite love, all woven into one simple repeating tune. I could feel the story behind it, the cold, the fear, the desperate need to comfort a child in the face of the inevitable. I didn't dare look into the woods. I kept my eyes locked on the white line on the road, my one tether to reality in this tunnel of sound and darkness. I just drove, my foot steady on the accelerator, pushing through the suffocating grief that was pressing in on me from all sides. I wanted to scream, to roll down the window and yell into the night, but my throat was clenched tight. All I could do was listen to his song.
Just as I started to think the road would go on forever, I saw a break in the trees ahead. The canopy opened up, and a sliver of pale moonlight washed over the asphalt. As I passed from under the oppressive canopy of the singing pines, the humming began to fade. It didn't stop abruptly, it just receded, as if the singer was standing still and I was driving away from her. The sound grew fainter and fainter until it was finally swallowed by the familiar drone of my engine. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 5 miles. My whole body was trembling, my shirt stuck to my back with cold sweat. I flexed my hands, trying to get the feeling back into my cramped fingers. My ears were ringing with the phantom melody. I drove for another 30 miles, the forest thinning out, the road widening, until I saw the blessed, greasy glow of a 24-hour truck stop. I've never been so happy to see neon lights in my life. I pulled my rig into the lot, the hiss of the air brakes sounding like a sigh of relief, and just sat there for a long minute, letting the silence of a parked truck settle around me. But it wasn't silent. I could still hear it. A faint, barely there echo of the lullaby, like a song stuck in your head after you've heard it on the radio. I shook my head, trying to clear it. It's just my mind playing tricks on me. The power of suggestion. I heard the wind, my brain filled in the blanks from that old man's story, and now I can't get it out of my head. It had to be that. It had to be. I stumbled out of the cab and into the diner. The place smelled of stale coffee and bacon, the most normal, reassuring smell in the world. I ordered a black coffee and a piece of pie I didn't want, just to have something to do. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes but a kind smile, asked me where I was coming from. "Down from Medford. Came over the pass," I said, my voice hoarse. Her smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, the high pass. It's a lonely road at night." I hesitated, feeling like a fool. "Heard a story about that pass, about some singing trees." She stopped wiping the counter and looked at me. It wasn't a look of disbelief. It was a look of recognition. "The singing pines? You mean you heard her?" "Heard what?" "The woman," she said. Her voice dropped low so the other couple of drivers in the diner couldn't hear. "The lullaby. My grandma used to tell me about it. Said she isn't just humming for her own lost baby anymore." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Grandma said the spirit is cold," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Always so cold. And she's still a mother. She worries about others out there in the dark, especially those who are alone. She hums to guide them through the pass, to keep them safe. But," she trailed off, glancing towards the dark windows, "but they also say a mother's love can be a desperate thing. They say she's always looking, always searching for a warm place, for someone to share her grief with." A chill went down my spine that was colder than anything I'd felt on the mountain. This wasn't a comforting ghost story anymore. This was something else, something that felt hungry. I finished my coffee, the pie untouched. The echo of the lullaby was still there in the back of my mind, a persistent, mournful whisper. I had to deliver this load in Portland, but then I had a pickup scheduled. The dispatcher's route was already in my log. It was the most efficient way, the only way that made sense. I was going to have to go back over that same pass in 2 days' time, and this time I wouldn't be an ignorant skeptic driving into a campfire story. I'd be a man who knew the singer was real, and who was starting to wonder if she wasn't just singing, but calling. 2 days later, I found myself at the foot of the same mountain, staring up into the same darkness, but everything was different. The first time, I was filled with skepticism and a vague sense of unease. This time, I was filled with a cold, hard knot of dread in the pit of my stomach. Every part of me was screaming to turn around, to take the long way, to add 8 hours to my trip and burn a quarter tank of extra fuel. But you don't do that in this business. You run your route. The daylight had bled from the sky, leaving behind a bruised, purple twilight that was quickly being swallowed by night. As I started the climb, I did something I hadn't done on the first trip. I killed the radio before I even entered the forest. I turned off the air conditioner. I wanted absolute quiet. I wanted to hear it the second it started. I was like a man walking into a duel, straining to hear the cock of a hammer. The forest closed in around me again, a familiar black tunnel. The air grew heavy and still. There was no wind tonight, none at all. The giant pines stood like silent, solemn mourners. For a mile, then 2, the only sound was the deep thrum of my engine. I started to let myself hope. Maybe it was just the wind after all. Maybe tonight she was quiet. Then, the temperature in the cab started to drop. It wasn't a draft. All the windows were sealed tight. It was a deep, penetrating cold that started at my feet and crawled up my legs. It was the kind of unnatural cold that feels wet, like being plunged into icy water.
I glanced at the thermostat. It was still set to heat, but the air puffing from the vents was frigid. My breath started to mist in front of my face. And then I heard her. There was no build-up this time. No faint, distant melody. The humming began at full volume as if she had been waiting for me right at the edge of her territory. And it was different. It wasn't just mournful. It was insistent, desperate. It was louder than before, filling the cab, pressing against my eardrums. The simple lullaby had an edge to it now, a pleading quality that was deeply, horribly unsettling. It wasn't a song for a sleeping baby anymore. It sounded like a call to the lonely. I kept my eyes glued to the road, but my gaze flickered to the passenger side window. The sudden, intense cold in the cab had caused the glass to fog over completely, a milky white film blocking out the blackness outside. As I watched, something impossible happened. A shape began to form in the condensation, a small, perfect handprint. It wasn't my handprint. It was tiny, the size of a child's hand. It appeared slowly, a dark print against the white fog, as if a small, cold hand had been pressed firmly against the glass from the inside. I froze. Every rational thought in my head evaporated, replaced by pure, ice-cold terror. This wasn't a story. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't my imagination. A child's handprint was appearing on my window in the middle of a haunted forest. The humming swelled, and for the first time it felt like it had a definite source. It was coming from the empty passenger seat next to me. The cold intensified, focused on that one spot, a tangible presence of grief and ice. I felt it, the profound, bottomless sorrow of that pioneer woman, her endless loss washing over me in a wave. It wasn't threatening or evil. It was worse. It was an invitation to share her pain, to feel her internal winter. I felt an insane urge to pull over, to stop the truck right there in the middle of the road, to just sit and listen, to let the cold take me. My heart hammered against my chest. I fought the urge, my foot trembling on the accelerator. "I can't help you," I whispered to the empty seat, my voice a choked rasp. "I'm sorry. I can't help you." The lullaby seemed to falter, to become a quiet, heartbroken sigh. The small handprint on the window remained, a silent testament to the impossible thing that was happening in the cab of my truck, alone on a dark mountain in Oregon.
Driving through the rest of that pass was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every instinct screamed at me to floor it, to get out of there as fast as the old Cummins engine could take me. But I couldn't. It felt disrespectful. More than that, I felt pinned in place by the sheer weight of the sorrow in the cab. So I just kept my speed steady, my eyes fixed on the road, trying not to look at the passenger seat, trying not to look at the little handprint on the fogged glass. The humming continued, but it had changed again. It was no longer pleading or desperate. It had returned to that original, heartbreakingly sad lullaby. It was a song of resignation, of a fate accepted. It felt as though she understood I couldn't stay, that I had to keep moving. The cold remained, a deep, bone-aching chill, but the oppressive feeling of being called to, of being pulled into her grief, had subsided. As I neared the end of the 5-mile stretch, where the trees began to thin, the humming started to fade, just as it had the first time. It receded back into the forest, a departing whisper on the air. I watched the passenger window. As the cab's temperature slowly, miraculously returned to normal, the fog on the glass began to clear. The small handprint didn't smear or run. It simply faded, becoming fainter and fainter until it vanished completely, leaving behind nothing but clear glass and the blackness of the night. The moment I was clear of the pass, it was like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. I took a huge, shuddering gasp of air. The world felt normal again. The engine was just an engine. The road was just a road. But I was not the same. I never told anyone the full story. Not really. How could I? How do you tell another driver, a dispatcher, your wife, that you shared the cab of your truck with a 150-year-old ghost and saw her baby's handprint on your window? They'd think you were crazy or drunk or worse. The story from the old-timer was one thing, a piece of folklore. What I experienced was something else. It was personal. I'm still a trucker. The road is still my life. But the quiet is different now. It's no longer just company. It's a space where I remember. I've had to run that route through the singing pines a dozen times since that night. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Not exactly. I'm respectful. Every time I approach the pass, I have a ritual. I turn off the radio. I slow down a little. I just listen. Sometimes the woods are silent, just the sound of the wind. On those nights, I feel a sense of relief. But other nights, when the air is still and cold, I hear her, faintly, gently, humming her endless lullaby in the darkness. I don't try to rationalize it anymore. I don't need to. I know what's real. Some things in this world don't have an explanation that fits on a shipping manifest or in a logbook. Some things just are. Out here, on the long, lonely roads, you learn that the world is filled with stories. Most you just hear, but every once in a while, if you're lucky, or maybe unlucky, you become part of one. I carry her story with me now, a piece of her cold, her sorrow, and her love. It's a heavy load, but it's one I'll haul for the rest of my days.